The autumn air carried a crisp bite as 6-year-old Penny Watson hugged her worn teddy bear closer to her chest. Her small fingers traced the bear's patched eye, a reminder of better days when her father was still alive. Seated on a weathered park bench beside her mother, Hannah, Penny watched other children playing on the colorful playground equipment, their laughter floating through Central Park like wind-borne dandelion seeds. "Are we bad people, Mama?" Penny's voice was barely a whisper, but it sliced through the ambient noise of the bustling park. Hannah's breath caught in her throat. She tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear, her once manicured nails now chipped and unpolished. "Why would you ask that, sweetheart?" "Because Ms. Reynolds said only bad people get evicted," Penny replied, her innocent blue eyes reflecting confusion beyond her years. "And Billy at school said we're gonna be homeless soon." 20 feet away, partially obscured by a large oak tree, Mason Grant paused mid-stride, his morning jog interrupted by the child's question. At 38, Mason was the definition of success. Founder and CEO of Grant Innovations, a tech empire valued at billions. The Financial Times had recently dubbed him America's most eligible bachelor, though that title meant little to him these days. He hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but something in the little girl's voice made it impossible to walk away. Mason took a sip from his water bottle, pretending to catch his breath while straining to hear the mother's response. Hannah pulled Penny closer, wrapping her arm around the child's narrow shoulders. "No, baby, we're not bad people. Sometimes good people go through hard times, that's all." Mason noticed the woman's worn clothes, once quality pieces now faded from too many washes. Her shoulders slumped with invisible weight, yet dignity remained in her posture. Something about her sparked a distant memory he couldn't quite place. "But why did they lock our apartment, Mama? Where are we going to sleep tonight?" Penny's questions tumbled out, each one driving deeper into Mason's conscience. Hannah swallowed hard, blinking back tears. "We'll figure it out, Penny girl. We always do." Mason moved closer, pretending to stretch against a nearby tree. The woman's profile stirred something in his memory, something from college, perhaps. Her face had the kind of beauty that endured hardship, with high cheekbones and determined eyes that seemed vaguely familiar. "Is Daddy watching us from heaven?" Penny asked, clutching her teddy bear tighter. "Would he be sad we lost our home?" "Your father loved us very much," Hannah whispered, her voice breaking slightly, "and he'd be so proud of how brave you're being." Mason's phone buzzed insistently in his pocket, likely Vanessa, his executive assistant, reminding him about the board meeting in an hour. He should leave. This wasn't his business. Yet something kept him rooted to the spot, unable to tear himself away from the quiet desperation emanating from the park bench. Hannah reached into her purse, a designer bag that had seen better days, and pulled out a peanut butter sandwich wrapped in plastic. She broke it in half, offering the larger portion to Penny. "Aren't you hungry, Mama?" Penny asked, noticing her mother had kept only a small piece for herself. "Not very," Hannah lied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You eat up." The simplicity of the sacrifice hit Mason like a physical blow. He thought of the 5-star breakfast waiting for him back at his penthouse, the fresh pastries, the artisanal coffee, the imported fruits, all prepared by his personal chef and largely untouched most mornings. As Hannah tucked a lock of hair behind Penny's ear, the gesture triggered a flash of recognition in Mason's mind. Hannah Watson, it had to be. They'd shared several classes at Columbia University 12 years ago. She'd been brilliant, top of their economics program, with dreams of working in international development. There had been a scholarship fundraiser where she'd spoken eloquently about financial inclusion. Mason remembered being impressed by her passion, her intelligence, her genuine desire to help others. What had happened to bring her here, to this park bench, with a hungry child and nowhere to go? Mason's phone buzzed again. This time he pulled it out and sent a quick text to Vanessa. "I'll be late. Reschedule the board meeting. Something important came up." Just as he pocketed his phone, a park security guard approached Hannah and Penny. "Ma'am, we've received complaints about loitering. The park benches aren't for extended stays," the guard said, his tone professional but firm. Hannah's face flushed with embarrassment. "We were just leaving," she said, gathering their meager belongings, a backpack, a small rolling suitcase, and Penny's teddy bear. "Where are we going now, Mama?" Penny asked, her voice small and frightened. Hannah forced a smile. "We're going on an adventure, sweetie, just like in your books." Mason watched as they stood, Hannah's shoulders squared, despite her obvious exhaustion. In that moment, he made a decision that would alter the course of multiple lives, including his own. He stepped forward, rehearsing what to say. Would she remember him? Would she accept help from a stranger? How could he offer assistance without wounding her pride? The questions swirled in his mind as he moved toward them. "Hannah!" he called, just as they began to walk away. "Hannah Watson?" She turned, confusion and wariness in her eyes, instinctively pulling Penny closer to her side. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" she asked, studying his face with the careful assessment of someone who had learned to be cautious. "Mason Grant. We were at Columbia together," he said, suddenly feeling strangely nervous. "Economics program? Professor Harrington's advanced theory class?" Recognition slowly dawned in her eyes, followed quickly by embarrassment. "Mason. Yes, of course." Her hand self-consciously touched her hair, then dropped to Penny's shoulder. "It's been a long time." "Too long," Mason agreed, trying to sound casual while desperately searching for the right words. "I was just about to grab some coffee and noticed you. Would you—" He glanced at Penny, whose curious eyes darted between the adults. "Would you both like to join me for old time's sake?" Hannah hesitated, pride warring with necessity on her face. Penny looked up at her mother, then at Mason, then at the teddy bear in her arms, as though consulting it for advice. "We wouldn't want to impose," Hannah said finally, the polite refusal of someone unaccustomed to accepting help. Mason smiled, realizing he needed to give her a reason to say yes, one that preserved her dignity. "Actually, you'd be doing me a favor. Board meetings are insufferable, and I've just found the perfect excuse to be fashionably late." A small smile tugged at the corner of Hannah's mouth, the first genuine one he'd seen from her. It transformed her face, briefly illuminating the bright, determined woman he remembered. "Well, if it's helping you play hooky from work," she began. "It absolutely is," Mason assured her, then knelt to Penny's eye level. "And I happen to know this great cafe that makes hot chocolate with extra marshmallows. Would you like that?" Penny looked to her mother for permission, before nodding shyly. As they walked toward the park exit, Mason could feel the weight of Hannah's unasked questions. Why was he really helping them? What did he want in return? He'd have to earn her trust, and that wouldn't happen overnight. But for now, at least they were walking toward warmth and food instead of uncertainty. What Mason didn't know, couldn't know, was that his impulsive decision to approach them would unravel secrets that had been buried for years, secrets that connected their lives in ways none of them could imagine. And the question that had first caught his attention, "Are we bad people, Mama?" would come to haunt him in ways he never expected. The cafe bustled with morning patrons, the aroma of freshly ground coffee beans and buttery pastries filling the air. Mason guided Hannah and Penny to a quiet corner booth away from the windows, noticing how Hannah's eyes darted nervously around the upscale establishment. Penny climbed onto the plush leather seat, her teddy bear still clutched tightly to her chest, her eyes wide at the elegant surroundings. "This place is fancy," she whispered to her mother. "Like in the princess movies." Hannah smoothed Penny's unruly blonde curls, a gesture Mason recognized as one of nervous affection. "Remember your manners, sweetheart." "I have a niece about your age," Mason said to Penny, though it was a white lie. His sister's daughter was nearly 10, but he needed a way to connect with the child. "She loves their hot chocolate, says it tastes like melted candy bars." When the waitress approached, Mason ordered coffee for himself and Hannah, hot chocolate for Penny, and one of everything from the bakery display, despite Hannah's protests. "Columbia seems like another lifetime ago," Mason said once the waitress departed, carefully steering the conversation away from their current circumstances. "You were going to revolutionize microfinance, as I recall. You had that brilliant thesis on community-based lending models." Hannah's fingers tightened around her napkin. "You remember that?" "Of course. Professor Harrington practically framed your paper, said it was the most innovative approach he'd seen in 20 years of teaching." A ghost of pride flickered across Hannah's face before disappearing behind the mask of exhaustion. Life takes unexpected turns. "Mama was a big-shot banker," Penny interjected, pronouncing banker with exaggerated importance. "She had a desk with her name on it and everything, before Daddy got sick." Hannah placed a gentle hand on Penny's arm. "Penny, Mr. Grant doesn't want to hear about—" "Actually, I'd like to know," Mason said softly. "If you're comfortable sharing." The waitress returned with their drinks and an enormous platter of pastries. Penny's eyes widened at the sight, but she waited until her mother nodded before reaching for a chocolate croissant. Hannah took a sip of her coffee, closing her eyes briefly as the warmth and caffeine worked their way through her system. When she opened them, there was resolve in her gaze. "Robert, my husband, was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer 3 years ago. We thought our insurance would cover most of it, but—" She shrugged, the simple gesture conveying volumes about the failures of the healthcare system. "The experimental treatments weren't covered. We maxed out credit cards, took a second mortgage on our home, emptied our savings." "I'm so sorry," Mason said, genuine empathy in his voice. "He fought hard," Hannah continued, her eyes focused on some distant point beyond Mason's shoulder. "For 2 years, longer than the doctors predicted, but the bills kept coming even after he was gone. I tried to keep up with everything. The mortgage, Penny's school, the medical debt. I was working at First National as a senior loan officer, but they downsized," Mason finished for her, familiar with the recent restructuring at several major banks. Hannah nodded. "6 months ago. I've been piecing together consulting work, but without childcare for Penny." She glanced at her daughter, who was happily demolishing a second pastry, chocolate smeared across her cheek. "Yesterday they changed the locks on our apartment." Mason felt a surge of anger at the system that could so easily discard someone like Hannah, brilliant, hard-working, caught in circumstances beyond her control. "Where were you planning to go?" he asked carefully. "The women's shelter on 42nd has a waiting list. I have a friend who might let us crash on her couch for a few days, but she's got roommates and it's complicated." Hannah's matter-of-fact tone couldn't disguise the fear underneath. "We'll figure something out. We always do, right, Penny girl?" Penny nodded solemnly as though this were a familiar mantra between them. Mason made a decision then, one that would alter all their lives. "I have a proposition for you, but I want to be clear. It comes with no strings attached. You can say no and we'll still figure out a safe place for you both tonight." Hannah's expression immediately grew guarded. "What kind of proposition?" "My company has been looking for someone to head our new community impact division. We're launching micro-lending programs in underserved neighborhoods, starting right here in New York." It wasn't a complete fabrication. He'd been considering such an initiative for months but hadn't moved forward with it yet. "Based on what I remember of your work, you'd be perfect for it." Hannah stared at him, disbelief etched across her features. "You can't be serious. You haven't seen my work in over a decade. You don't know my qualifications now." "Then show me," Mason challenged gently. "I have a guest apartment in my building downtown. It's sitting empty. Stay there while you interview for the position, put together a proposal. If it doesn't work out professionally, no hard feelings, and you'll at least have a stable place to regroup." "Why would you do this?" Hannah asked, suspicion edging her voice. "We haven't spoken in years. You don't owe us anything." Mason considered his answer carefully. The truth was he wasn't entirely sure himself. Was it guilt over his own privilege, a genuine desire to help, or something more? A connection to this woman he'd once admired from afar, but never had the courage to approach romantically. "Let's just say I'm in a position to help, and I'd like to." He reached for his phone. "At least let me arrange a hotel for tonight while you think about it." Hannah's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "We're not a charity case, Mason. I never thought you were," he replied quietly. "But everyone needs help sometimes." Penny, who had been following the adult conversation with the intuitive understanding of children who faced hardship, suddenly spoke up. "Daddy said sometimes angels don't have wings, they just have kind eyes." She studied Mason solemnly. "You have kind eyes." The simple observation disarmed both adults, breaking the tension. Hannah laughed softly, wiping at her eyes, while Mason felt an unexpected lump form in his throat. "Tell you what," he said, pulling out a business card and writing on the back. "This is my personal cell and the address of my building. The guest apartment is on the 18th floor. Think about it. No pressure, no timeline." He slid the card across the table. "And if you decide it's not for you, I still have connections at several banks and non-profit organizations. I can make some calls, help you land on your feet." Hannah stared at the card for a long moment, before slowly picking it up. "Thank you," she said simply, tucking it into her purse. As they finished their breakfast, the conversation turned to lighter topics. Penny's favorite subjects in school, art and reading, Hannah's passion for urban gardening, Mason's recent trip to Japan. The initial awkwardness gradually faded, replaced by the tentative beginnings of trust. What Mason didn't mention was the nagging feeling that there was more to Hannah's situation than simple financial hardship. Several times during their conversation, she'd glanced nervously at the cafe door, as though expecting someone unwelcome to walk in. And there was something about the way she deflected questions about her former employer that raised his instincts. After they parted ways outside the cafe, Mason heading to his delayed board meeting, Hannah and Penny toward her friend's apartment to regroup, he made a discreet call to his head of security, James Blackwell. "I need a background check," he said quietly, watching Hannah and Penny disappear around a corner. "Full workup, particularly her employment history at First National Bank. And I want to know why someone with her qualifications couldn't find another position in this market." Mason knew he was crossing a line, investigating Hannah without her knowledge, but the protective instinct that had awakened in him that morning in the park wouldn't let go. There was a story here beneath the surface, and something told him that Hannah and Penny might be in more trouble than simple eviction. What he couldn't possibly know was that his innocent act of kindness had already set in motion a chain of events that would expose dangerous secrets, threaten his own carefully constructed world, and ultimately force him to question everything he thought he knew about success, justice, and redemption. As his town car pulled away from the curb, Mason didn't notice the dark sedan that had been parked across from the cafe, or the man inside who raised a camera with a telephoto lens, capturing images of Hannah and Penny walking away. 3 weeks later, Hannah sat cross-legged on the plush carpet of the guest apartment, surrounded by spreadsheets and proposal drafts. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the spacious living area that had become their temporary home. On the coffee table, her laptop displayed financial projections for the community lending program she was developing for Grant Innovations. Higher, Mama! Push me higher! Penny's delighted squeals floated in from the balcony, where Mason was pushing her on the small swing he'd installed last weekend, a surprise that had brought the first real joy to Penny's face since they'd moved in. Hannah watched them through the glass doors, a complex mix of emotions swirling inside her. Gratitude, certainly, for Mason's generosity, wariness still about his true motivations, and something else, a warmth that blossomed whenever she saw him with Penny, a feeling she'd ruthlessly suppressed since the moment she recognized him in the park. The apartment phone rang, startling her from her thoughts. Few people had this number. Hello? Ms. Watson, this is Edward from security. There's a gentleman in the lobby insisting on seeing you. He claims to be from your former employer. I informed him that residents don't accept unscheduled visitors, but he's quite persistent. Hannah's blood turned to ice. Did he give a name? Victor Collins. He says it's an urgent matter regarding your previous position. Her fingers tightened around the receiver. Under no circumstances should he be allowed up. Please tell him I'm not available. Of course, Ms. Watson. Would you like us to escort him from the property? Yes, she said firmly. And Edward. If he returns, please notify me immediately. Hannah hung up, her hands trembling slightly. Through the glass doors, she could see Mason lifting Penny off the swing, both of them laughing. She couldn't drag them into her mess. She'd have to tell Mason the truth, or at least part of it, before Victor found another way to reach her. Later that evening, after Penny had been tucked into bed with a story, Hannah found Mason in the kitchen, uncorking a bottle of wine. I thought we could celebrate, he said, smiling as he poured 2 glasses. The board unanimously approved your proposal this afternoon. The Community Lending Initiative gets full funding, starting next month. And they want you to run it. Hannah accepted the glass but didn't drink. Mason, that's incredible. But there's something I need to tell you. His smile faded at her tone. What's wrong? Someone from my old bank came looking for me today. Victor Collins. He's not someone I want to see. She took a deep breath. I wasn't completely honest with you about why I left First National. Mason set his glass down, giving her his full attention. I'm listening. I didn't just get downsized. I was pushed out after I filed a report with compliance. She paused, gathering her courage. I found irregularities in several large corporate accounts, money moving through shell companies, loans approved without proper documentation, interest rates manipulated. You discovered a money laundering operation, Mason said quietly. Hannah nodded. At first I thought it was just sloppy paperwork, but when I dug deeper, I found connections to offshore accounts and patterns that suggested the money was being cleaned before moving to legitimate businesses. When I took my findings to my supervisor, I was told to drop it. When I refused, they fired you. Technically, I was part of a restructuring, but yes. 2 days later, my company email was deactivated. My security clearance revoked, and my personal files were confiscated. Her voice hardened. But I kept copies, backed up everything to an encrypted drive. I didn't know what to do with it. These are powerful people, Mason. Then Robert got sick, and fighting a corporate giant wasn't my priority anymore. Mason's expression had grown increasingly troubled. And this Victor Collins, was he part of the scheme? He's the bank's head of security, former FBI agent. The day after I was terminated, he came to my house ostensibly to retrieve my company laptop, but he searched my home office, claimed he was making sure I hadn't taken company property. Her voice dropped to a whisper. He threatened me, Mason. Not directly, but he made it clear that pursuing the matter would have unfortunate consequences for my family. Mason's jaw tightened. Why is he looking for you now, after all this time? I don't know. Unless... Hannah paled. The external hard drive with the evidence. It's in our apartment, was in our apartment. When we were evicted, Your belongings would have been put in storage or disposed of, Mason finished grimly. And if Collins was monitoring your situation, he might have access to it now. Hannah stood abruptly, pacing the kitchen. I should never have stayed here. I've put you and Penny at risk. We need to leave. Mason stepped forward, gently catching her arm. Hannah, slow down. My building has the best security in Manhattan. Collins won't get near you or Penny here. You don't understand, she insisted, pulling away. These people aren't just white-collar criminals. The money I traced, it's linked to some dangerous organizations, international groups that don't hesitate to eliminate problems. All the more reason you shouldn't face this alone, Mason argued. He hesitated, then continued more softly. There's something I need to tell you too. I had my security team run a background check on you after we met. Hannah stiffened. You investigated me. I was concerned. Something didn't add up about your situation. He raised his hands placatingly at her expression. I know it was a breach of trust, and I'm sorry. But what we found confirms everything you're telling me now, plus more. The accounts you flagged? They're connected to Meridian Global Holdings. Hannah sank back against the counter. Meridian. They're one of the largest clients at First National. They have interests in everything from real estate to pharmaceuticals. And their CEO, Richard Davenport, sits on the board of First National, Mason added. My team found something else. 3 other bank employees who raised concerns about irregularities in Meridian's accounts over the past 5 years. One died in an accidental drowning. One disappeared while on vacation in Mexico. The third recanted their claims and was later found to have received a 7-figure deposit in a Cayman Islands account. The implications hung heavily between them. Hannah's worst fears were being confirmed. If Collins found the hard drive, she began. Then we need to act quickly, Mason finished, but not by running. That would only make you look guilty of something. Guilty? I didn't do anything wrong. I know that, Mason said firmly. But Collins could be building a case to frame you. Make it look like you were the one manipulating the accounts. Hannah's mind raced through the possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. What about Penny? I can't put her at risk. We'll protect her. My team can arrange for secure transportation to my estate in Connecticut. She'll be safe there with my staff while we deal with this. We? Hannah challenged. This isn't your fight, Mason. Something shifted in Mason's expression, determination hardening into something fiercer. It became my fight the moment Collins showed up here. Besides, he added with a grim smile, Meridian has been trying to acquire my tech division for years. Davenport and I have history. Before Hannah could respond, her phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced down at the screen and froze. What is it? Mason asked, alarmed by her expression. Hannah wordlessly turned the phone toward him. The message, from an unknown number, contained a photo of Penny at school earlier that day, followed by 3 words. Insurance policy. Cooperate. Mason's face darkened with fury. That's it. We're moving you both to Connecticut tonight, and tomorrow we're taking everything you have to the FBI. No, Hannah grabbed his arm. You saw the message. They're watching Penny. If we go to the authorities, if we don't, they'll keep using her as leverage indefinitely, Mason countered. Trust me, Hannah, I can protect you both. Hannah studied his face, weighing her options. Finally, she nodded. Okay, but we do this my way. I spent months compiling evidence. I know exactly which transactions proved the money laundering, which executives were involved, and where the authorization codes originated. If we're going to the FBI, we need to give them a case they can't ignore or bury. Agreed, Mason said. Pack what you need for a few days. I'll make arrangements and wake Penny. As they prepared to leave, Hannah couldn't shake the feeling that something still didn't add up. Why would Collins make such a brazen move now? And how had he found them at Mason's building, which few people knew about? The answer came to her in a horrifying flash of clarity as she was gathering Penny's things. The timing of Mason's appearance in the park, his immediate offer of help, his convenient proposal of exactly the kind of job she'd be perfect for. Had it all been too perfect, too convenient? "Mason," she called, stepping back into the living room where he was on the phone with his security team. "How did you know where to find us that morning in the park?" Mason ended his call, looking confused. "What do you mean?" "Central Park is huge. What made you jog past our particular bench at that particular moment?" Her voice hardened. "Did Collins send you? Was this whole thing a setup to gain my trust?" Mason's expression shifted from confusion to shock, then to hurt. "Hannah, no. It was coincidence. I jog the same route through the park every morning." "Coincidence," she repeated skeptically. "And I suppose it's also coincidence that you remember specific details about my thesis from 12 years ago. That you just happened to have a perfect job opportunity that matched my skills. That your company has been interested in micro-lending programs that align perfectly with my experience. I remembered your thesis because I admired your work," Mason replied, his voice tight. "And yes, I created the position for you, but not as part of some conspiracy. I did it because I wanted to help." Hannah grabbed her phone, backing toward Penny's room. "I don't believe you. This was all too convenient. You're working with them, aren't you? Maybe not directly with Collins, but with Davenport, with Meridian." "Hannah, you're not thinking clearly. We don't have time for this." Collins threatened Penny. "Don't use my daughter to manipulate me." Hannah's voice rose sharply before she caught herself, glancing worriedly toward the bedroom where Penny still slept. She lowered her tone to a fierce whisper. "I'm taking Penny and leaving. Don't try to stop us." Mason stepped forward, then halted when he saw her expression. "At least let my security team escort you somewhere safe, so they can report back our location." "No, thank you." She retreated another step. "I trusted you, Mason. That was my mistake." As Hannah turned to wake Penny, Mason's next words stopped her cold. "Robert asked me to look out for you both if anything happened to him." Hannah slowly turned back. "What did you just say?" Mason's face was etched with regret and something else. Guilt. "Robert and I met at a charity event 4 years ago, before his diagnosis. We stayed in contact. When he got sick, he reached out to me, worried about what would happen to you and Penny if..." He trailed off. "He made me promise to keep an eye on you, to help if I could, but to do it discreetly. He knew you wouldn't accept outright charity." Hannah stared at him, speechless, as the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place, and the ultimate betrayal took shape in her mind. "You knew my husband?" Hannah's voice trembled with disbelief. "All this time you've been... what?" "Watching us struggle from afar?" Mason took a step toward her, then stopped when she flinched. "It wasn't like that. Robert asked me not to interfere unless it was absolutely necessary. He said you were fiercely independent, that you'd resent outside help." "So you waited until we were homeless? Until Penny and I were sleeping on park benches?" Anger flared in Hannah's eyes. "How generous of you." "I tried to help earlier," Mason insisted. "The anonymous donation to Robert's medical fund? The mysterious scholarship that covered Penny's school tuition last year? The consulting job that coincidentally came through when you were 3 months behind on mortgage payments?" Hannah stared at him as realization dawned. "That was you. All orchestrated so you wouldn't know because that's what Robert asked of me." Mason ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in his gesture. "When I saw you in the park, I broke my promise to him. I was supposed to stay in the shadows, but I couldn't. Not when I saw what was happening to you both." The apartment phone rang shrilly, cutting through the tension. Mason answered, his expression darkening as he listened. "When?" he demanded. "How many?" After a pause, he continued, Lock down the building. No one gets in or out without my authorization. And James, activate Protocol 7. He hung up, turning to Hannah with urgency. Collins is in the lobby with 3 men. They've disabled the security cameras and have my head of security at gunpoint. He moved to a painting on the wall, swinging it aside to reveal a hidden safe. We don't have much time. Hannah hurried to Penny's room, gathering the sleeping child in her arms. What's Protocol 7? Emergency evacuation, Mason replied, typing a code into the safe. He removed a small handgun, checking it quickly before tucking it into his waistband at the small of his back. There's a private elevator that leads to a secure garage. We need to move now. Penny stirred in Hannah's arms, blinking drowsily. Mama? What's happening? We're going on a little trip, sweetheart, Hannah soothed, her voice belying the fear coursing through her. Just a little adventure, okay? Mason led them to what looked like a closet, but opened to reveal a narrow hallway. This way. Stay close. As they hurried through the hidden passage, Hannah's mind raced with questions. If you've been helping us secretly all this time, why didn't you step in when First National pushed me out? You must have known what was happening. I didn't, Mason said grimly as they reached the elevator. Robert never mentioned your work issues. I assume he was too consumed with his illness by then. When you disappeared from public view after his death, I hired investigators to find you, but you'd changed your phone, moved apartments several times. By the time we located you 3 months ago, you were already struggling financially. The elevator doors opened onto a dimly lit garage containing 3 vehicles, a sleek sports car, an SUV, and an unassuming sedan. The sedan, Mason directed, opening the rear door for Hannah and Penny. It's armored and has tinted windows. Once they were inside, Mason slid behind the wheel, pressing his palm against a concealed biometric scanner. The car hummed to life. Mason, Hannah said quietly as he navigated toward an exit different from the main garage doors. I need to know something. Are you connected to Meridian in any way? Please, just tell me the truth. Mason met her eyes in the rearview mirror. No. But I know who is. He pressed a button, and a hidden door in the garage wall slid open, revealing a narrow exit ramp. Richard Davenport and I were college roommates. We started our first company together. When we had our initial success, he wanted to move into more questionable investments. I refused. We split the company and he founded Meridian. So this is personal for you, Hannah said, the pieces falling into place. It became personal the moment he targeted you and Penny. Mason's voice hardened. Davenport has always been ruthless in business, but I never thought he'd stoop to threatening a child. As they emerged onto a side street, Penny fully awoke, sensing the tension. Mama, I'm scared. Where are we going? Somewhere safe, Penny girl, Hannah assured her, smoothing her daughter's tousled hair. Mason navigated through back streets, constantly checking mirrors for signs of pursuit. I have a private airfield in New Jersey. We can be there in 40 minutes and on a plane shortly after. My pilot is standing by. Running won't solve anything, Hannah protested. They'll just keep coming. We're not running, Mason replied firmly. We're regrouping. I have the resources to fight Davenport, but I need time to mobilize them, and I need you both safe while I do. Suddenly, headlights flooded their car from behind. A black SUV pulled alongside them at an intersection, trying to force them toward the curb. Hold on, Mason warned, accelerating through a yellow light. The SUV followed, gaining on them. Hannah clutched Penny tightly, her heart pounding. They found us. Not for long, Mason said with grim determination. He made a sharp turn down an alley, then another onto a busy avenue, weaving through traffic with practiced precision. The SUV stayed with them, closing the distance. As they approached another intersection, a second SUV appeared ahead, attempting to cut them off. "Mason!" Hannah cried in alarm. "I see it!" He swerved abruptly, mounting the sidewalk momentarily, before dropping back to the street on the other side of the blocking vehicle. Horns blared around them as Mason pushed the sedan to its limits. Penny whimpered against Hannah's chest. "Make it stop, Mama. Please make it stop." Hannah's protective instincts surged. This had to end, not just the immediate danger, but all of it. The threats, the fear, the running. For too long she'd been reactive, trying to shield Penny from harm by staying quiet, staying hidden. It was time to fight back. "Mason, I need your phone," she said with sudden resolve. He passed it back without question as he continued evasive driving maneuvers. Hannah dialed a number from memory. "Agent Ramirez," answered a gruff voice. "This is Hannah Watson. We met 6 months ago when I tried to report irregularities at First National Bank." A pause. "Mrs. Watson, I wondered what happened to you. You missed our follow-up appointment." "I was threatened," Hannah said plainly, "but now I'm ready to provide everything, all the evidence, all the connections. But I need protection for my daughter and myself. Where are you now?" Hannah looked to Mason, who nodded as he continued driving. "We're being pursued by people working for Richard Davenport of Meridian Global. We need immediate assistance." Mason held out his hand for the phone. "Agent Ramirez, this is Mason Grant. I can provide corroborating evidence connecting Davenport to illegal financial activities, including the threats against Mrs. Watson and her daughter." He gave their location and heading. "We're in a silver Lincoln sedan, pursued by 2 black SUVs. We're approximately 10 minutes from my private airfield in Teterboro." After hanging up, Mason made a hard right, entering an industrial area. "Ramirez is dispatching field agents and alerting local police. We just need to stay ahead until help arrives." The pursuing vehicles had fallen back slightly, but remained in sight. As they approached the airfield perimeter, Mason pressed another button on the dashboard. Ahead, security gates swung open automatically. "Almost there," he encouraged as they sped through onto private property. A small jet stood ready on the tarmac, stairs deployed, engines already whining as they spooled up. Mason drove directly to the plane, stopping at the base of the stairs. "Go," he urged, reaching for his gun. "Get on board. I'll hold them off until Ramirez's people arrive." "No," Hannah said firmly, surprising herself with her steadiness. "We stay together. All of us." As if in answer to her declaration, sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second. The pursuing SUVs screeched to a halt at the airfield gates, momentarily stymied by the security measures. "They're coming," Mason observed, relief evident in his voice. He holstered his weapon and helped Hannah and Penny from the car. Together they hurried up the stairs into the jet's luxurious cabin. The pilot secured the door behind them as police vehicles swarmed the perimeter surrounding the intruders. "We're clear for immediate takeoff, sir," the pilot informed Mason. "Where to?" Mason looked to Hannah, raising an eyebrow in silent question. "Somewhere they can't reach us," she decided. "Just until the FBI has what they need." "The island," Mason directed, "and notify our legal team to meet us there." As the jet taxied toward the runway, Hannah gazed out the window at the flashing lights below. For the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of hope, not just for safety, but for justice. Penny had fallen asleep again, curled against her side. Mason sat across from them, his expression both relieved and determined. "Thank you," Hannah said simply. "For everything." "Don't thank me yet," he replied. "We still have a battle ahead. But we're not fighting it alone anymore." Hannah reached across the space between them, taking his hand. The gesture was both an apology for her earlier distrust and a promise of partnership moving forward. 6 months later, Hannah stood at the edge of a pristine beach, watching Penny build an elaborate sandcastle with Mason. The private Caribbean island had become their sanctuary, while the case against Davenport and his associates proceeded in New York. With the evidence Hannah had preserved, bolstered by Mason's financial expertise and connections, the FBI had built an ironclad case. Richard Davenport and 7 other executives from Meridian and First National were facing multiple federal charges. Victor Collins had turned state's evidence, revealing the full extent of the money laundering operation in exchange for leniency. Hannah's phone buzzed with a text from Agent Ramirez. Davenport denied bail. Trial set for June. You're clear to return whenever you're ready. She smiled, slipping the phone back into her pocket. They would return soon. Penny missed her friends, and Hannah was eager to fully launch the community lending initiative that had been operating remotely under her guidance. Mason looked up from the sandcastle, catching her eye with a questioning look. She nodded, and his answering smile warmed her more than the tropical sun. That evening, after Penny had been tucked into bed in her room in the beachfront villa, Hannah joined Mason on the terrace overlooking the ocean. "Ramirez says we can go home," she told him, accepting the glass of wine he offered. "And is that what you want?" Mason asked carefully. "To go back?" Hannah considered the question. Home had been an elusive concept since Robert's death, a series of increasingly desperate situations, culminating in that park bench where Mason had found them. "I want Penny to have stability," she said finally. "A real home, not just a place to stay. Friends, school, community. We can provide that here," Mason suggested. "Or anywhere else you'd like. Paris, London, Tokyo." Hannah laughed softly. "You make it sound so simple. It can be." He moved closer, taking her hand. "Hannah, these past months, watching you fight for justice, seeing your brilliance in action as you've built the lending program from here, getting to know Penny, they've been the best of my life. Mine too," she admitted quietly. "Despite everything." "Then let's build something permanent," Mason said earnestly. "Not just a program or a company, but a life, together." Hannah studied his face, the kindness in his eyes that Penny had recognized from the beginning, the determination that had saved them both, the gentle patience that had given her space to heal and find her strength again. "Robert would approve, you know," she said softly. "Of you. Of us." Mason's eyes glistened slightly. "I hope so. I promised him I'd look after you both, but this is more than I ever expected to find." Hannah leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. "When Penny asked me that day in the park if we were bad people, I was at my lowest point. I felt like I'd failed her, failed Robert, failed myself." "And now?" Mason asked. "Now I know we're not defined by what happens to us, but by how we respond." She smiled. "And by who stands beside us when things get hard." As moonlight sparkled on the gentle waves, Hannah kissed him, a promise of the future they would build together. A future where Penny would never again have to question her place in the world, where justice would prevail over corruption, and where love would transform 3 broken paths into one whole journey. The next morning, Penny found them making breakfast together in the villa's kitchen, their easy laughter and casual touches telling a story even a 6-year-old could understand. "Are we going home soon, Mama?" she asked, climbing onto a stool at the counter. Hannah exchanged a look with Mason before answering. "Yes, sweetheart, but home might look a little different now." Penny considered this, her young face serious. "Will Mason come too, if that's okay with you?" Mason replied carefully. Penny's solemn expression bloomed into a bright smile. "I knew it. I told Teddy you were our angel, even without wings." As Hannah watched her daughter launch into an animated conversation with Mason about their sandcastle construction plans for the day, she felt the final piece of her heart heal. From that desperate question on a park bench, Are we bad people, Mama? To this moment of pure joy they had traversed an impossible journey, and somehow, against all odds, they had found their way home.